About NABCO, the Nation Builders Call. This was, when it was established, was supposed to be the poster baby for this government when it comes to creating employment for young people. And they say they were told that there was going to be a path once you are in NABCO to permanent employment. But as we've seen, it hasn't turned out like that. Many of them say they are in limbo. They haven't been paid for months. They are now protesting on Thursday because they're simply disillusioned. That's what the promise that they gave them. So what is happening to NABCO? The thing about it is that NABCO is just the latest in a long series of other government youth employment schemes that simply didn't go according to plan. Often, they turn out to become a monumental waste of public resources. The evidence is there for all to see. We're going to track all the way from as far back as we can remember since all these agencies started being created and what it has achieved. And have a conversation about the NABCO issue, but what that means for the bigger picture of government getting into the business of employing people, right, in this part of the world, whether that is the right approach to take. We're going to go into that. That's the conversation we're having today. And as you see in the shot there, we have all these agencies that have, in one time or the other, been used by government as a means of creating jobs directly for the youth. Now, the key question that you always need to ask yourself as you look at these youth agencies and youth schemes is, should government fundamentally themselves directly be involved in employing people? I mean, just for the purpose of creating jobs for the youth. I mean, apart from the civil service, which government uses to employ a lot of people, government then goes out of its way to create all these agencies and schemes to give employment to the youth, right? But shouldn't government rather be creating an enabling environment for private businesses to thrive, so they rather provide employment for young people? That's a conversation that we're going to get into. So you see here, Youth Employment Agency, 2005. I remember when this was established, it was a big deal then, right? Created by the John Kufuor administration. Many young people were employed. What became of those young people who were employed? Was it sustainable? The key question that we see running through all this is sustainability. Often then they become job for the boys. They become an avenue for the government to give jobs to a lot more of the NPP card-bearing card-bearing members as the accusation have gone. And so invariably, they don't succeed. We have the Youth in Agriculture program, which was also one that was created. And then we have the National Entrepreneurship Innovation Program, previously the Youth Enterprises Support, which is YES, and a Nation Builders Call, NABCO. Now, these, by the way, it's in a World Bank document, and World Bank had done a thorough review and assessment of all these agencies that government seem to create, the schemes that they create to create jobs, and they list a few of these, a bit more though than this. But if you look at the Youth Employment Agency, it's gone through several phases in metamorphosing into several other names from what they used to be. So we have the National Youth Employment Program in 2015. And then there was the almighty JIDA, right? So this didn't really work out. It was hit by its own crisis, and then it was then changed. The name was simply changed. And then Ghana Youth Employment and Entrepreneurial Agency, that's in 2012, right? We had JIDA. You remember JIDA? JIDA was one of the biggest, I guess, scandals that hit the administration back in the day. And then they changed it in the wake of all the controversies that JIDA faced, all the allegations of corruption that it became a vehicle for. The government felt the need to stop it and then reevaluate. And so they came back with a new vehicle, the Youth Employment Agency, in 2015 through the promulgation of the YEA Act. And the thinking then was that after the pause on this, that we've learned the lessons, and so we're going to do a proper work and pass a proper act to have the Youth Employment Agency. So that is how the Youth Employment Agency came about. It was hopefully a vehicle that was constructed based on lessons from JIDA, which everybody, if you follow news, remember how scandalous it was. And there were many vehicles that this created. We have the Youth in Agriculture, Youth in Security, Youth in Sanitation, Afforestation, Community Health Workers, Coastal and sanitation workers, community education and teaching assistants, trade and vocations, vocation jobs, youth in paid internships. There's a whole host of them. It was under that the very famous story of the Akomfem became a very popular part of our own, folktale in Ghana, when the previous government was criticized for having the youth in guinea fowl rearing, etc., which then, didn't pan out for anything. That is how these schemes have been, is over the years. All this, they employ people, and then accountability processes are very, very porous. How the money is spent, but you hear millions and millions of cedis pumped into these to create jobs. But over a period, you can find, so these people who we created jobs, so where are they? Are they still in the system? Are they really employed? That's another key question that we need to look at. Can we really call the jobs under these proper employment, so-called? We have a labor expert who will join us in that. Should we call them proper employment? Were the NABCO, trainees, were they employed? Were not? I mean, what really are we dealing with here? But I want to isolate the National Service Scheme for some comment, because arguably it's been one of the most successful schemes when it comes to empowering young people coming out of school with skills for the job market. I guess that's one of the ideas behind it. So you come out of school, fresh out of school, you don't have no skill. You go to the national service, you acquire some skill on the job, you finish, that then sort of sets you up for proper employment permanently, right? Very successful. All of us have gone through that, backed by law. If you don't go through this, you won't get an employment because you need your certificate to show that you've done national service. But recently, the current boss of the NSS said this, that the NSS to become an employable agency. And I think this is a big deal, hasn't been examined enough. I mean, the whole idea that he's pitching now, the current administration of NSS, is to turn it from what they used to be now as this, transit area for all of us who did this. 1 year, do your national service, work somewhere, get the skills, move on into the job market and get employed, mostly in the private sector, because you would have gained that experience. You earn something, an allowance. But the idea is being now mooted by the current boss of the NSS, Mr. Sebeyenchi, to turn the NSS into an employable agency. We're going to be looking at that. Will this work? Is that the way to go? Looking at all that has come before it, right? That, put it bluntly, failed. JIDA and then others that have come, that it failed. Should we be turning NSS, one of the arguably most successful schemes, into one that employs people on a permanent basis? Key question to consider when we sit down and look at this. Now, again, the World Bank gives us a picture of how much we're spending, how many people we're employing, right? The Youth Employment Agency and Nation Builders Corps are the largest programs, right? Each engaging, according to the World Bank, close to 100,000 youth annually. So 100,000 youth annually is huge, huge. But you've heard from the NABCO trainees. One of them will join us shortly. They say, after this, then what, right? You give us a job for 1 year or whatever period it is. What happens to us after that, right? They said they were promised permanent jobs and they didn't get, right? And if you look at the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, another one, launched in July 2017 by the government with seed funding of $100 million to meet the financing needs of young entrepreneurs. And huge monies are put into this, huge monies are put into this. The accountability mechanisms are always ones that we need to look at. And this program replaced the Youth Enterprise Support, which was YES. And they all have all these very interesting names. I mean, every government wants to do one for themselves. It's almost as if there's a competition between the government. Kufuor's government did it. Mills' government did it. John Mahama had his own. Akufo-Addo is on. He also has his own. Several of them, indeed. Let's go through a few of them that they put forth. So we have NABCO, 100,000 youth covered. Youth Employment Agency, 80,000 beneficiaries. National Afforestation Program, 44,000 youth. National Afforestation, we are going to employ youth to plant trees. I mean, questions need to be asked about these. Who is monitoring this? Who is enforcing it? Who is making sure that the monies that we're using in this is going to employ people? The word employment comes up again, right? We'll come to that. And we have the National Alternative Employment and Livelihood Program. Again, another one. If you look, this is the source, budget, about 2020. It's telling us all this our government is going to spend money on, millions and millions of dollars. Is going to go into this particular one. But again, if you look at the World Bank data that we also look at, according to the World Bank, out of a pool of 145,000 applicants, and remember that the Youth Agency has been doing this facilitation between themselves and private companies to give employment to people. So they have the job fair recently. Brilliant idea, if you ask me. Brilliant idea. Get the private players in the room and let them interface with those who don't have jobs. It was a brilliant idea, right? Instead of government creating an agency to employ and spend taxpayers' money to do that, let's facilitate the process. They sort of switched the idea a bit, which was a brilliant idea. And if you look at those who went there, some of them got jobs, some of them didn't, which is what the graph here shows. And if you also look at the World Bank data on the youth employment program run by government, this is overall, out of a pool of 1.3 million applicants that had come through the process, those who did not get access at all is 81%. That's huge. So the tiny minority of 19% gain access. So it tells you that it's almost like a basket. A lot of them go through and just come the other way without really getting anything that they can hold on to as permanent employment. That's why we look at it. Why? That's why we say some of them fail. And if you look at the numbers here, jobs that government is creating directly, we are talking about 2015, 357,000 jobs that government is creating. The biggest line item there in terms of the jobs created so far is what you have here in 2019. This government has the record in terms of the jobs that they created, almost 500,000 jobs. So this is good, but should government be in this business at all? Because you see that it drops from 2019. So what happened to all the thousands of people who were here? Because you come to 2020 and it's dropped to 80,000. It's the assumption that all the almost 500,000 are still in employment. You can't say that because the NABCO guys are complaining that they are jobless now, right? So there's a projection for government to create even more jobs now into 2030, right? And then agenda 1 million jobs, again in the budget, right? Government announced a 1 million job initiative. How is government going to do this? To create 1 million jobs, right? Responding to the unemployment issue. Is it through NABCO, which is struggling, obviously? And it was in the budget. It's a question. But there's money that has been allotted for that. It's a key thing. And if you look at agenda 1 million jobs, targeting SMEs, so empower the SMEs, give them the resources so they can also stand on their feet so they can also employ. That's a smart strategy, right? Others have said. Support new ventures and stimulate innovation and startups is what government has said. There are so many of them. There's also the U-Bank, right? And then there is the youth-led startup businesses. So there's so many things that the government wants to do to create employment. Why don't you centralize? Is another question that had come so that we can monitor, because it seems to be all over the place here. Then we have the other issues that have come up, the modules that the government plans to roll out about Empower Youth Entrepreneurship Drive, the Ghana Skills Enterprise Development Project, Student Entrepreneurship. So this government is doing a lot. Two things happen. One, to equip people with skills. Two, to give them resources so they can stand on their own. And three, to give them permanent employment of a sort, right? Which of these is the best approach to deal with? We'll come to my guest shortly. And according to Finance Minister, we're going to put in 4.5 billion allocation under the Ghana Cares Program partnership with the private sector just to create these jobs. So this is not small money. This is a lot of money for this economy that's already struggling. So we're going to look at this whole big animal that we've seen over the years.